Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Friday, February 10th, 2023. Time for another show. Still not quite entirely recovered here, but doing our best to push on through. Oh, you know what I'm going to have to do? Just making sure that all things are in order here. Got to get the alarms turned on so I remember when to take the breaks, because I'll go right through them if no one tells me anything about it. All right. So, much lined up, much waiting in the wings, of course, for the past couple of days, as we cleared out a couple of the longer reads and more involved stories. Lots to catch up on, but no one else here to help catch up on them with you. But that's okay. We have a lot of the things that I have collected at this point are things that Greg collected along the way and we didn't get to, things like that, you know. So, at any rate, solo effort today. And a little bit behind, I know this doesn't matter to any of you, but when I'm mere seconds behind the schedule, it creates issues in the post-show editing for podcasts. But for the live streamers, you lucky live streamers who get to tune in for every, hack, cough, sneeze, throat clearing, etc., you get to hear it all. And it doesn't make a difference. For the podcast listeners who have the deluxe experience where I sound a little bit healthier occasionally, okay. So we go through a little bit of trouble for you, but that's the deluxe experience, I guess. By the way, speaking of the deluxe experience, yet another contributor joining in yesterday with a boost to their existing pledge, Jesse Brohl, if I have your name correctly pronounced, joining in with a boost to his thing. And I appreciate that. A lot of people have done just that. And I guess that's part of the pitch when I tell you, well, really, it's like $1 a day to do it this way. $20 a month is a fairly substantial contribution for people to make. It's very nice when people are able to do it. It does come down to about $1 a day. And so I tend to pitch it as a 50-cent a day thing. Because, people get nervous when they're asked to put up the $20. But even $20, these days, that doesn't even make it through a week at Starbucks. So I suppose you could look at it that way. Anyway, appreciate everybody's attention to that little detail, like, paying to keep the show going. There are hosting fees here in addition to, of course, time, effort, other people's work, all sorts of things. And, by golly, it would be nice to sell this show for $10 million to Spotify or something and pay Greg, pay Joan for the time that they spend on the air as well. But we're on a shoestring budget. And the price of shoestrings through the roof today thanks to inflation. Thanks, Biden. I can't believe it. $114,000 for a pair of shoelaces. I just saw that tweeted by a member of Congress from Utah who had the eggs wrong the other day, but he's probably right about the shoelaces. And I think we can afford to go with that without any sort of fact check, don't you? Okay, let's get to the stories. There are many of them. I don't know what's dominating the social media scene yet today, although I understand there was another blow up at the Bird site yesterday with Elon Musk firing one of the two remaining actual engineers who run the place. I gathered from the story, and I didn't pay that much attention to it, but you probably heard the story or something like it, so we'll just play the telephone game and pretend that this is the story. Because we don't do fact-checking here. It's not done. We don't have time for that sort of thing. But I guess Elon Musk became convinced. I don't know where he first saw the things, the stats. Maybe he took a look at the analytics and he found, or someone told him or pointed out to him, that the statistics measuring the audience engagement with his tweets showed a precipitous drop in that engagement. And it shouldn't surprise you. Hundreds of thousands of people are leaving the service and switching to Mastodon, and doing so because they don't like Elon Musk. So, there's likely to be less engagement with him. Although, in the past on Twitter, you might say that would increase your engagement. But once they realized that he was in it for a profit and was looking to make money, and they felt like they could hurt him in the one place that mattered to him, they stopped engaging. And I guess he asked the engineers to look into the code to see if anybody had slipped some malicious coding in there to algorithmically reduce his engagement stats, because of course everybody wanted to engage with Elon Musk. And I guess the engineer who told them, no, I looked and there isn't anything, and I guess, maybe you're just not that popular, got the boot, got fired. That's the story that's circulating. I don't know if it's true. I don't really, I guess I don't really care if it's true or not. What can I tell you? It sounds truthy enough for us to start the morning with, I guess. I don't know. Everybody's talking about it. I'm just saying people are talking about it. I'm using the journalist excuse here. I have to transcribe it. Okay. Let's see. So many other things to share with you today. And I'll try and keep an eye on hashtags and KITM notices, etc. I missed out on my opportunity to retweet some of the live listeners' comments and warnings, I guess, to their fellow Mastodon users yesterday, as John Shiflett usually does. If another such warning goes out today and I can catch it with a glance at Mastodon, I'll be happy to retweet it, reboost it, I guess, is the terminology for it. I still haven't gotten used to that. All right, though. Time to dive into Pocket, though I do have the Bird site open so I can monitor the old school KITM hashtag. And there are a couple of things parked there that we might want to try and clear out and consider them part of our backlog as we do with Pocket. All right, so let's see. Oh, okay. I also have another entry today from Rosalind McGregor, which comes to mind because I pocketed the Michigan Advance articles from which she drew her material in her commentary. So don't let me forget to include that at some point. All right. I wanted to, let's see. Well, I don't know how to do it. There's no order for today. We'll do it in catch can ordered. First up, because it's first up in Pocket, seems important and we don't have a topic yet. And of course, the word first is in the headline, so it's a hint from the universe. First on CNN. That's what they're trying to say. That's the new exclusive. It's exclusive until somebody else hears about it, and then they report it. There's no reason to keep it exclusive. I guess that's what first on CNN means. Trump's former national security advisor subpoenaed in special counsel probes of classified documents, January 6th. Remember, both of those investigations now fall under the Jack Smith purview here. Zachary Cohen and Paula Reed are the byliners on this one. Former National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien. I bet you forgot that he was a National Security Advisor at any point. Robert O'Brien has been subpoenaed by Special Counsel Jack Smith, whose name is totally real, in both his investigation into classified documents found at former President Donald Trump's sex club Mar-a-Lago residence. Mar-a-Lago is the club. I guess Mar-a-Lago is the residence as well. It's all the same. And I don't know why we don't refer to it as a swingers club, because it's kind of what it is. They got older, and now they mostly just walk around and go to dinner with each other. But, I mean, that's kind of what it was, and I don't know why we hide it. But there it is. Well, anyway, he's subpoenaed the former National Security Advisor in the matters of both the classified documents found at Mar-a-Lago and the probe related to efforts to overturn the 2020 election, the sedition and insurrection, according to a source familiar with the matter. Who are these sources? That's for CNN to know first and you to find out, maybe never or possibly later on today. O'Brien has been asserting executive privilege, believe it or not, in declining to provide some of the information that prosecutors are seeking from him, the source said. CNN has reached out to O'Brien for comment. Of course, this theory has been tested 100 times, but it's never been tested with Robert O'Brien's name on it. So he feels entitled to say maybe all of the rest of the people who pled that they didn't need to respond to these subpoenas thanks to executive privilege were wrong, but Robert O'Brien is right. And maybe he, as national security advisor, might have a slightly different claim. But of course, remember that the executive privilege belongs to the actual executive. He's the guy that gave the State of the Union address the other day. That's not the former guy. So I don't know. O'Brien, I guess now we have to wait a couple of weeks for somebody to assert in a courtroom style, a courtroom type manner that, no, you're actually not entitled to that, and you are in contempt of court if you don't show up and comply with the subpoena. O'Brien considered resigning from his post over Trump's response to the violence on January 6th, but ultimately decided to remain on the job. So there'll be some questions about that, I'm sure. The National Security Council should have been involved in the handling of classified documents at the end of the Trump presidency, and O'Brien may have knowledge of how those records ended up at Pervo-Lago. Separately, Trump's former acting Department of Homeland Security Secretary, and for him, we got to play the acting sound effect. We're talking about Chad Wolf. Well, he was interviewed by the Justice Department and its lawyers in recent weeks as part of the ongoing special counsel investigation related to the 2020 election interference. According to two sources familiar with the matter, two are these people, in fact, and two is the number of them in this case. Rather than appearing before a federal grand jury, Wolf was interviewed under oath by Justice Department lawyers and FBI officials, something one of the sources characterized as a standard first step for prosecutors. That's likely so. Wolf declined to comment on his recent interview with federal investigators, which was first reported by Bloomberg. They got to run with the headline first on Bloomberg, of course. A spokesman for Smith also declined to comment. The interview comes after Wolf's former deputy, Ken Cuccinelli, remember him? You do if you live here in Virginia, after he testified last month before a federal grand jury as part of Smith's election interference probe. When Cuccinelli was asked at the time whether privilege claims arose, he said, "They did, and I didn't say anything." I'm not sure exactly what we're talking about here. O'Brien, Wolf, and Cuccinelli were previously interviewed by the House Select Committee that investigated the January 6th insurrection. For the time being, Smith has not sought testimony from a handful of other potentially relevant Trump administration officials. So no testimony so far sought from former Secretary of Defense Christopher Miller. Seems necessary, too, because, of course, Miller had a hand in the non-deployment of troops to respond to the violence. Or former Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe. Two other sources tell CNN. There's a lot of sources we don't know about here. In the days after the January 6th attack, Wolf urged Trump and all elected officials to condemn the violence on Capitol Hill, calling what transpired tragic and sickening. Well, maybe that gets him off the hook. I don't know. While I have consistently condemned political violence on both sides of the aisle, and there really has only been significant political violence on one side of the aisle, I remind our listeners, but you're allowed to get away with it because saying something, a throwaway phrase like both sides of the aisle is permitted as, almost accidental to even in the range of accidental. I'm used to saying it to very purposeful planting of the notion. It's all excused for whatever reason, even though, again, there really is no political violence happening. And I guess I'll stop here on this thing again. I know I'm obsessing on this, but both sides of the aisle. I know that's meant to mean both sides of the political spectrum. It's still wrong when it comes to both sides of the political spectrum, because quite honestly, actually probably in most cases where there's violence on what people would perhaps identify as the left, it very often was horseshoed around to the right again. But anyway, when they say both sides of the aisle, I mean, the aisle is a political term of art. And I know most people don't use it this way, or they use it over broadly and they mean the spectrum. But when you say the aisle, you're talking about, in the legislatures, like among officialdom. And remember that there are only members of one party who are, for instance, being stripped of their committee assignments on account of their threatening violence, political violence against their opposition. There's tit for tat going on, which of course they insist is not tit for tat, removing people from, removing Democrats on the other side of the aisle, the actual aisle, not just the metaphorical aisle, but not for threatening violence against their colleagues, but because they disagree with their speech. So, that there's no equivalence there either. But when you're talking about, if you're going to use the word aisle, you should probably be a little bit more honest. But remember, we're talking about Chad Wolf, and he's just not going to be honest about it. But when he's saying the sorts of things that normies think they're supposed to hear from former government officials, he says things like this: while I have consistently condemned political violence on both sides of the aisle, wink, wink, specifically violence directed at law enforcement, we now see some supporters of the president using violence as a means to achieve political ends, Wolf said at the time. This is unacceptable. But this, of course, that's supposed to be his excuse and his free pass to get through all of this. But, we'll scrutinize it a little bit further and just remind everybody what he's doing here. Without saying as much, he doesn't use the words, but he's pulling the "what about Antifa" card out here. Not that he's necessarily actually trying to say that I believe that the violence of the day was caused by Antifa rather than Trump supporters. He's admitting that much. But he's saying, well, as deplorable as it is, the violence is understandable in the context of the fake fact that Antifa or Black Lives Matter has caused just as much disruption and violence in the United States as the people who were there on January 6th. That's not true. There's really no equivalence between them. He's trying to sound normal-ish, but he's pulling out a real, an old canard here that just doesn't make any real sense under a microscope, but it's CNN, so they're not going to stop and tell you so. But we do. That's what we do here on the show. And it's not even a waste of time. It's the actual theme of the show. So, okay. Moving on from there to the next stuff that I have parked away. Something I didn't mention the other day and probably should have, or maybe Greg might even have had it on his list and we didn't get around to it. But this, according to everybody, because it's fact. But I'm reading from PBS, the main flagship, I guess, pbs.org, from the NewsHour site. Democrats win control of Pennsylvania House, ending years of GOP. You know how we like to say it here on this program. GOP rule. What do you know? Here's the headline. There is a byline. It's an Associated Press article, actually. Mark Scalfaro, responsible for this piece. Dateline Harrisburg, of course, because you remember from grade school, that's the capital, Pennsylvania. Democrats won control of the Pennsylvania House in special elections on Tuesday. That would be like the other day, wresting partial power from Republicans for the first time in a dozen years in the competitive swing state. Democrats won all 3 vacant Pittsburgh area House seats to claim a slim edge over Republicans, finally securing a majority they first appeared to have won in last November's general election. What was going on here? I recall there was some weirdness surrounding control of, now that they mention it. Oh yeah, whatever happened to that? Republicans still hold the Senate, creating a political division that could make it difficult for lawmakers to send priority bills to new Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro, who, of course, got mentioned on the show the other day. As Greg was pointing out, he might be figuring out a viable path back to entering the consciousness and perhaps winning over the votes of some of, I guess, the working class folks to whom we often refer as Reagan Democrats. Well, Well, we'll see how that plan goes. But at any rate, right now we can focus on this. The special elections capped several months of electoral drama. Good. Please tell me about the drama. Republicans held a comfortable 113 to 90 House majority last year. That is pretty comfy. But a once a decade redistricting and strong performance in statewide races helped Democrats flip just enough seats in the fall election to win, at least what looked like, a 102 to 101 majority in the House. Or so it seemed. That sounds kind of ominous. I don't know. Maybe the horror dramatic music is the proper response to that. So it seems. Well, 3 of those Democratic seats quickly became vacant, casting uncertainty over who actually controlled the chamber. Representative Tony DeLuca died of cancer in October, shortly before winning re-election. Representative Summer Lee resigned after also winning a congressional election. And Representative Austin Davis quit before being sworn in as lieutenant governor. So 3 understandable reasons here. That left Republicans with more people in the House than Democrats and led to a political impasse. You see how that can happen, right? You guys won the election, or you won more seats in this House, but for various reasons. But you only had a 1-seat majority, and one guy died. One guy was elected lieutenant governor. Good news for Democrats, but it means he's not in the House. And one was elected to Congress, and that means she's not going to be there either. So physically, if we take a vote, Republicans have the majority, but Democrats were handed the majority at the polling stations. So what do we do with that? That is an interesting problem. Now that's starting to make some sense. So, right, that left Republicans with more people in the House than Democrats and led to a political impasse. The chamber elected Democratic Representative Mark Rossi as Speaker as the new session began on January 3rd, but only after Republican leaders and a few other GOP members joined with all Democrats on the vote. How do you like that? That wouldn't have happened. It didn't happen in the United States Congress, right? It became clear that Republicans had the majority, but they couldn't get their act together to elect their speaker, even as among themselves. And this is interesting. So here, there were at least a couple of Republicans who were willing to acknowledge Democrats had won, and of course those 3 seats all perhaps being very heavily Democratic leaning, having been occupied by Democratic incumbents previously, it was likely that they were also going to stay in Democratic hands, as would the majority. And why press the issue just for a couple of weeks and hold out? Why don't we just say, let's get down to business, let's get started, elect a Democrat as speaker and get to work, and when the other 3 people show up, we'll be able to hit the ground running. I don't know what their motivation was, whether it was that altruistic or something else, but interesting to see it having happened. The House has been frozen, though, since Rossi took over, and he's R-O-Z-Z-I, by the way. He could be Rotzi by some reckonings. Since he took over, and has not passed internal operating rules. So there wasn't really that much agreement on what to do, I guess. Practically none. Let's see. They haven't been able to assign members to committees or approve any legislation, of course. Rossi said last week he wants to retain the speakership when Democrats convene with their newly elected members. I mean, I think that's fair game. At a news conference in Pittsburgh late Tuesday, the Democratic floor leader, Representative Joanna McClinton, said the 3 Democratic candidates had been, quote, tossed into the mixer really quickly to compete in the special elections. She noted Democrats have been in the House minority for 24 of the past 28 years. McClinton wants the speakership. But she said she did not want to, quote, get ahead of the days to come as the election results are fully tabulated. The certified people asking people to, quote, please stay tuned to see what the will of this body will be when the House returns to voting session. Okay. So I suppose it's possible that Speaker Rossi here was perhaps a compromise candidate, perhaps somebody who was conservative enough to get just enough Republican votes to be installed as Speaker, But that left to their own devices, the Democratic caucus there might have chosen someone else. At least Joanna McClinton thinks they might have chosen her. So, interesting. A few minutes after McClinton was done speaking, the clerk's office sent out an email with notice of House floor sessions to resume in 2 weeks. Democrats had been expected to win Tuesday's special elections because they had easily won the same seats last fall. DeLuca's former seat was won by Democrat Joe McAndrew, 32, a business owner who is a former state House Democratic staffer and the former executive director of Allegheny County's Democratic Committee. Sounds like a plausible resume, but of course now you have to check everything, right? Thanks to George Santos over here. Anyway, Lee's former seat was won by Abigail Salisbury, 40, a lawyer and Democratic member of the Swissvale Borough Council, and Matthew, is this Gurgley? What kind of, all right. I don't know how I'm pronouncing it. Gergely, a Democrat who works for the McKeesport city government, was elected to succeed Davis. The special elections occurred only after the courts rejected an attempt by the House Republican floor leader. This sounds somewhat intriguing. That would be Representative Brian Cutler, to prevent 2 of the contests from being decided on Tuesday. Why so? Let's see if we can find out over our break introductory music here. When the newly elected lawmakers take office, I guess not, they're just going to go right to this one. The House may still be 1 member short of its full complement, and that's because Republican Representative Linda Schlegel-Culver won a special election on January 31st to fill a vacant state Senate seat. Oh, okay, but that has happening over in the Senate. That doesn't have anything to do with the House. No, okay, she moves over there. Okay, now that leaves a Republican seat vacant. That's true. I get it.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And, so we finished that up. We made it all the way through the AP article. And, yeah, I finally figured out what they meant by the House being 1 member short of its full complement. It just won't matter because it's a Republican who's missing, and they're supposed to be in the minority. But good way of pointing it out, just figuring it out at the end. So the House is without its full complement, that's true. But the question of who's in the majority has been settled. The question of who will lead that majority has not been settled, and we'll see how that shakes out in the days to come. Okay, and while we were away, and I was checking the incoming email, I have yet another announcement to make, another contribution coming in via PayPal this time. Stephen Miller, not the bad one, the good one that we all like, who has joined it. He's been on the list for some time as a patron, and I think contributing fairly regularly through PayPal, but I appreciate the boost, of course, as always, and it's always a fun opportunity to say out loud that Stephen Miller, it's spelled differently, but to say out loud that Stephen Miller is supporting the show. We may recall there is also another longtime PayPal supporter whose name is Bill Barr, who I assume also is not the former Attorney General, but it's fun to have the two of you. It's fun to have any one of you, really. But okay, thanks very much again for the support. And as it turns out, every time, it's painful to do these things, but every time I make mention of these things, people are spurred to action. So I guess that really argues for more of this and not less. But you and I can reach a bargain whereby if 1,000 people just show up as monthly sponsors, then I leave you alone. So it's really in your hands. Isn't this really your fault? I don't know what I'm saying with this stuff. Okay, let's move on. The other stories waiting in the wings, some of them very exciting. Speaking of Stephen Miller, the other one, maybe we'll jump into this one. This will come as a huge shock and surprise to everyone. New York Times reporting Steve Bannon's podcast is the top misinformation spreader, a study says. Well, to hell with the study. I could tell you that, but, the point is it got published and now it's a study and now it means something. I don't just have to tell you. A large podcast study, this would be a study of many podcasts, I assume, as opposed to just a study of large podcasts. I don't know. Found that Mr. Bannon's War Room had more falsehoods and unsubstantiated claims than other political talk shows. And they may even have looked at InfoWars. I don't know. At any rate, that apparently, by the way, is what you have to do to make lots and lots of money, I think, without bothering the people listening to the show to actually become sponsors. But again, that's the motivation here. Bannon has just got a ton of money coming in for his crap that is almost all false, and he's just one of dozens, probably hundreds. I can't really figure that out. It does, I mentioned it the other day that, things like the Spotify contracts that have come to light for, what's his name? Ben Shapiro, and then the other guy who was like pissed off that he only got $10 million or something. I don't remember who it was, but you remember this? And, all the other, there are literally dozens, and if not hundreds, of right-wing ideologues who spew complete crap. And I don't know, it's just, that's wingnut welfare. There's just money there available for them. And I can't even understand the market thinking behind it. Like, I understand that there's lots of Republican, I guess, leaning billionaires and other wealthy folks who are willing to part with money for ideological reasons. But I just kind of wondered, there are several hundred such podcasts. Isn't that enough? What do we need more for? And then, of course, the sad truth that on the, quote, other side of the aisle, and I don't mean aisle here, I mean political spectrum, there's nothing like that sort of support, and no one can figure it out. I don't know. But normal people who actually say, yeah, I'll support some things, do cobble some dollars together from time to time. I just don't understand how they can put, literal $1 million packages on the table for people nobody ever heard of, and they're going to lie to you. I don't know. I guess we'll just never understand those people. Anyway, what we do understand is that Steve Bannon's podcast is full of lies, thanks to, a report written by someone else, but for now, the report about the report written by Stuart Thompson in the New York Times. When Stephen K., that's his middle initial, but we like to add GB, when Stephen KGB Bannon, the White House strategist turned podcaster, and really he was a podcaster first, written podcast, I guess, in the form of Breitbart. But then he turned White House strategist because they hired him because the guy who was president was crazy. And he said, let's have a total a-hole loudmouth be my advisor, and that'll excite people. Well, when he was explaining the latest COVID-19 developments in 2021, he passed the microphone to a special guest, Clay Clark, an evangelist and anti-vaccine activist. For nearly 10 minutes, Mr. Clark rattled off one false and misleading statement after another. COVID, and I guess, warning ahead of time. YouTube, I do not believe these things. I do not promote these things. This is the quote of an idiot who is totally wrong about COVID. And because I'm reading it, doesn't mean I support it. I actually oppose it. And when your robot takes this content down, this will be, well, you'll really piss me off. I don't know what can I tell you. I mean, you're going to make this mistake. I can see it coming. And yet this is real and it has to be reported. I'm willing to go there for you, the listener, but not you, YouTube. You suck. Anyway, here is the thing that a crazy idiot said about COVID, which is wrong. And I'm reading from the New York Times, which is a story about him being wrong. He said the following wrong thing, YouTube. COVID is, quote, 100% treatable with hydroxychloroquine and other drugs. No, it's not. And it says it right here, of course, in the text that I'm reading. It's not my fault. In the New York Times, it says, parentheses, no, and the no is linked to show you that it's not the things that this Mr. Clark said. He also said the following wrong thing, YouTube. COVID vaccines are filled with fetal tissue. That is false. I don't believe it. The New York Times doesn't believe it. YouTube doesn't believe it. This Mr. Clark believes it, and he was on a show where they say they believe it. They're wrong. We hate them. They're terrible. Don't put anything on YouTube that has Stephen Bannon in it. I don't know whether he's allowed on YouTube or not. Meanwhile, I'm the one getting taken down in all of this. Another dumb thing that he said that is wrong. He said concentration camps are coming. No, they're not. Bill Gates owns a demonic patent. I don't even know what that is. What? That's not a thing, right? Okay, he owns a patent, and Clay Clark says it's for a demonic thing, maybe? Is that what that's... The dumb claim that is wrong is Bill Gates owns a demonic patent for a cryptocurrency that is injected into your body. And it just says right after that in parentheses, where to begin. Which is, by the way, YouTube, it's the reporter saying, that is false and wrong and dumb and you shouldn't believe it and it's misinformation and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And also don't let anyone tell you that you're not allowed to hear that it's misinformation because a robot has mistaken the misinformation's debunking for the misinformation itself. That would be extraordinarily dumb. How could you be a multi-billion-dollar company and be that dumb? I don't know. But we'll see if that happens. Anyway, the story goes on, if I'm not already banned, to say, there are no conspiracies, but there are no coincidences. Mr. Bannon concluded minutes later in what has become his show's catchphrase, which I'm not sure what it means. Mr. Bannon has spent the past few years parlaying his stint as the chief strategist for former President Donald J. Trump into a prominent role as a right-wing personality. His hour-long, and it's only an hour long, come on. His hour-long War Room podcast episodes are released at least twice daily. Oh, okay. Well, then he does at least 2 hours a day. That's interesting. Releasing 2 of them a day. Maybe I could do that. Even as Mr. Bannon faces various legal challenges, including a guilty verdict last year for contempt of Congress and accusations from Manhattan prosecutors that he defrauded conservative donors. Maybe that's how he got all his money. That's what I should be doing, defrauding donors. In a study, no, YouTube, I am not defrauding donors. Let me just put that out there. Okay. In a study released on Thursday by the Brookings Institution, Mr. Bannon's show was crowned the top peddler of false, misleading, and unsubstantiated statements among political podcasts. And I'm trying hard, but I'm just never going to reach it, I guess. Researchers at Brookings downloaded and transcribed 36,603 podcast episodes from 79 political talk shows, probably not mine. But if you did at Brookings, please give the transcripts and an analysis of them to YouTube so they'll put my January 21st, 2023 episode back up. That's the latest of the ones that they've decided were misinformation somehow. Anyway, no wonder they didn't get to mine, because they transcribed 36,603 podcasts from episodes from 79 political talk shows that had been released before January 22nd, 2022. I missed it by a year. Maybe it was the celebration of the anniversary for which YouTube took my episode down. When researchers compared the show's transcripts against a list of keywords and common falsehoods identified by fact-checkers, they found that nearly 20% of Mr. Bannon's War Room episodes contained a false, misleading, or unsubstantiated statement, more than shows by conservatives like Glenn Beck and Charlie Kirk, which, again, just to remind you how many dozens of these people exist out there. And I would imagine that's just what lit up the list of keywords. I would be so bold as to say 100% of the episodes of the War Room contained a false, misleading, or unsubstantiated statement. It's just that only 20% of them, and that's a high number, lit up the board with these specific keywords and items. Overall, about 70% of the podcasts reviewed had shared at least one false or misleading claim, the researchers found. I've certainly shared at least one. Why am I not on this list? Conservative podcasters, though, were 11 times as likely as liberal podcasters. Shouldn't that be 11 times more likely than liberal? I don't know. To share a claim that fact checkers could refute. Mr. Kirk, a conservative activist and the founder of Turning Points USA, ranked second with 17% of his episodes containing an unsubstantiated or false claim. The Rush Limbaugh Show, which they note parenthetically ended when Mr. Limbaugh died in 2021, and the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show shared third place, and they're alive. So that's really something. With the Michael Savage Show ranked fourth. Valerie Wirtschafter, a senior data analyst at Brookings who led the research, said some falsehoods and errors were expected to slip through on talk shows where conversations were typically recorded live. But what does stand out, particularly for a show like Bannon's War Room and a few others, is just how frequently this type of content appears, she said. Mr. Bannon said in an interview that the Brookings report was, quote, a badge of honor, adding that War Room was a leader in vaccine skepticism, election fraud claims, and other topics commonly flagged as misinformation by fact checkers. What they call disinformation or misinformation, we consider the truth, he said, and time is proving us out. It isn't, but, what is proving him out is he's got millions of dollars for doing this work, and we're banned from YouTube every once in a while. Okay. The findings underscore the vital role that Apple, Google, and a constellation of podcast apps play in connecting disinformation peddlers to their audiences. Yeah. Why don't I get connected to audiences? Researchers showed sourced shows, from Apple's podcasts. Maybe if I could read, they would put me on the list. Researchers sourced shows from Apple Podcasts lists of the 100 most popular political talk shows. That's my problem. And they added several more that Apple's algorithm recommended. Yeah, I'm probably not getting recommended either. Joe Rogan, who hosts the Joe Rogan Experience, has also been criticized for sharing misinformation about COVID-19 and vaccines, but his show was not included in the analysis because it is distributed only by Spotify. Well, no wonder. Big tech companies have taken a largely hands-off approach, except YouTube with my little podcast, have largely taken a hands-off approach to podcast content. And I guess that's true even with YouTube. There are no hands working on this, and that's the reason this thing gets taken down all the time. It's robots. A human would understand what was going on. Well, anyway, tech companies have taken a hands-off approach, avoiding the kind of scrutiny that has dogged social networks for years. The companies say they have little responsibility for podcast content because they are effectively search engines connecting listeners to shows, but never hosting content. The companies have policies that ban hateful language or content that might incite violence, sort of. But researchers said those policies were vague and poorly enforced, allowing false content to spread. Apple's and Google's software connects listeners with podcasts using an algorithm that surfaces recommended shows. Ivy Choi, a spokeswoman for Google, said the company did not recommend shows through its algorithm if they contained harmful misinformation, including Mr. Bannon's War Room. A spokesman for Apple declined to comment. Some liberal podcasters or their guests also shared false or unsubstantiated statements. Shoo, I was going to reject this whole article out of hand if they didn't say that, because then I would know that they were lying about that thing which I actually knew already about War Room. Well, anyway, now they've said the thing, so now you can listen to them, Mr. Normie, including statements by Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York about child poverty or immigration, which fact-checkers rated false or mostly false. Not only are they giving you the other side of the aisle argument so that you can now take this article at face value, but in case you were going to say, you're going to hand me somebody who I don't believe was uttering falsehoods, give me the scalp of Bernie Sanders and AOC. Well, there you have it. Now you've got it. I am certain that there are Democrats on this side of the aisle who are more conservative than those two, who also have said things that have been rated false or mostly false by fact checkers. But they're not in this article. Anyway, Dr. Wirtschafter said conservative shows, though, far outpaced liberal ones in sharing misleading information. Many podcast hosts, she said, leveraged fears over the pandemic to captivate anxious Americans. A roster of anti-vaccination activists and armchair experts pushed baseless theories about the coronavirus and COVID-19 vaccines. They said COVID could be treated or cured using ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, two existing drugs. So, fact check. True, they exist. Despite evidence that they were not effective. That gets fact check true, too. They're not effective. YouTube. What we wind up is with everybody as a health expert, all because they saw some study, Dr. Wirtschafter said. Now, I'm an expert in who's telling lies in their podcast just because I saw some study, I guess. Mr. Bannon, for example, frequently prodded for evidence in interviews with guests, conveying an apparent search for truth. But as clips of these interviews show, he often gave his guests the final word, seldom endorsed opposing views, and rarely cautioned his audience to wait for more information. Maybe there is some nuance or debate in the conversation, Dr. Wirtschafter said, but Mr. Bannon leaves listeners with the clear impression that officials and institutions, quote, are totally lying to you, unquote, she added. I would agree with that characterization of the world. Natalie Winters, a co-host and executive editor of War Room, said in an interview. She added that the show's goal was to go up against the mainstream narratives, to provide the counterpoint to it. Hey, I mean, we kind of have that as a goal, too. But we don't lie as much. Mr. Bannon appeared confused in one episode after Steve Kirsch, a technology mogul and founder of the Vaccine Safety Research Foundation, an anti-vaccine group, said it wasn't known what was inside the vaccine. Give us your evidence for that, Mr. Bannon said. We're not allowed to ask the pharmacist for a vial or even a squirt and then send it to the lab and have it analyzed for what's actually inside those vials, he said, asking whether the vaccine contained mercury or other harmful chemicals. Vaccine manufacturers and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention provide detailed lists of the vaccine's ingredients. But screw all of that, I guess. Mr. Bannon was a prominent voice in the Stop the Steal movement, so he should be getting investigated by the special counsel, Smith, a coalition, of course, of election deniers and Trump supporters who pushed falsehoods and conspiracy theories about the 2020 presidential election in a bid to overturn the results. In one episode from 2020, Mr. Bannon ticked off a long list of conspiracy theories about election fraud. Bannon also presaged the attack on the Capitol on January 6th, saying on his podcast, all hell is going to break loose tomorrow. When the War Room touched on conservative lightning rods like abortion, the show sometimes drifted into conspiracy theories and echoed QAnon, the political online movement claiming that, quote, global elites engage in child sex trafficking and other crimes. Liz Yore, a lawyer and podcaster who has shared conspiracy theories about the pandemic, said the global elites supported abortion so they could research extending their own lives using fetal tissue. Which is also dumb and we don't believe. YouTube. Ms. Yore's claims appeared to be based on research that used aborted fetal tissue and stem cells to study infectious diseases and cancer in mice. Ms. Winters said fringe voices on War Room represented 0.001% of the show. You can give everyone a voice, she said. Just because it's printed or said on the show, it doesn't necessarily mean you're endorsing it. But you are. So, anyway, for that. So now that we're banned from YouTube, those of you listening to the podcast on YouTube won't get the rest of these stories. But there are several more, and I thought I might share some of them with you. Let's see. Maybe we can squeak this one in before the break. Just an update on things happening in the States and more crazy legislation being brought forward in the state legislatures, copycat legislation, this time once again targeting LGBTQ community in North Carolina. According to WRAL News, the North Carolina senators have sent a controversial LGBTQ bill to a vote after tense committee hearing. Critics of North Carolina's Parents' Bill of Rights, guess where that language comes from, say it's harmful to LGBT students, they left the Q out this time, and could be used to ban books or put students in harm at home. Supporters say it's needed to stop inappropriate discussions of sexuality or gender at school and to stop children from keeping secrets from their parents. In other words, it is the North Carolina version of the Don't Say Gay bill, but it's got a new twist. And if we don't get all the way through the article, the twist is one that's, been copied in various states around the country, requiring teachers to out students who they believe to be LGBTQ in one way or another to their parents, so that there's no mistaking what's going on, I guess, except if you're, of course, making a mistake. But I don't know. They're supposed to share that information with the parents because parents have a right to know, but those kids live in your house, and if you haven't noticed, maybe that's your fault, but whatever. But there's a lot of problems with it. Let me give you the rundown from the article. North Carolina's so-called Parents' Bill of Rights cleared a final committee hurdle in the state Senate on Monday following a meeting where dozens of parents, students, and activists spoke out both for and against the bill. The Republican-backed bill, and let's not forget that, Republican-backed, which will now be voted on Tuesday. The language of this, the writing is driving me crazy, but okay. Will be voted on Tuesday by the full Senate, so I guess it has come and gone. We should find out what happened. Would ban teachers in much of elementary school from mentioning anything related to gender or sexuality. You all have to go to the bathroom in the person's room, I guess, because you can't say you've got to go to the boys' room or the girls' room. That's a mention of gender. Oh my God, maybe they haven't thought this thing all the way through. GOP supporters say that's a common sense rule. Democratic critics say it would be used to ban books that are age appropriate for young children simply for portraying the existence of LGBTQ people like a character who has two dads. Republicans have said critics shouldn't call this a Don't Say Gay bill. Oh, I didn't know that they thought we shouldn't do that. A label critics have applied to similar legislation in other states, because it's true. Proponents of the North Carolina bill emphasize that teachers wouldn't be completely banned from talking about gender or sexuality, so I guess they can still mention boys' room and girls' room. It just doesn't say that. The bans only apply in kindergarten through fourth grade, said Senator Amy Galey, a Burlington Republican, where they have a coat factory, presumably, who sponsored the bill. And by the way, I just want to say that it's funny that your name is Amy Galey when you're so angry about LGBTQ people. So, ha on you. Anyway, yeah, only in kindergarten through fourth grade are you not allowed to talk about going to the boys' or girls' room. I bet they really haven't worked that out, by the way. Anyway, so if a student asks the question, though, it says it applies only to the official curriculum. So maybe this is the out. So if a student asked a question, the teacher wouldn't be banned from answering it, she said. Can I go to the boys' room? Yes, you can. That's not really a question about curriculum. But even if they ask about gender identity in some way, it can't be in the curriculum. Maybe that works. I don't know. The bill, though, would also force teachers in any grade to out some gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender students to their parents, even against the wishes of the students. The bill would require notification of parents if a student asked to be called by a different name or different pronouns, or if there is a change, quote, related to his or her child's mental, emotional, or physical health or well-being. Interesting. Gailey said that in general, the main goal of the bill is placing a strong emphasis on communication between school and the home. That's a nice whitewashing of it. But it struck me as, well, problematic. I'll read a little bit more about it, and then I can tell you what my particular problem is, besides just, it's an invasion of their privacy. Democrats particularly oppose that portion of the measure, by the way, saying it will lead to children being abused. Think about that. Republicans say it's necessary to stop children from keeping secrets from their parents. Several LGBTQ students and adults came to oppose the bill on Monday, including Callum Bradford, a 16-year-old high school junior who is transgender. Yes, parents do have rights in a school setting, he said, but what the senators fail to recognize is that students also have rights. Bradford's parents have since talked about the changes with him, he said, but he's thankful he had the chance to figure out some things before coming out to them. Much of my processing about my gender identity came before I told my parents, he said. Democratic Senator Julie Mayfield of Asheville asked how schools would be able to keep students safe if the bill passes. Not all families are the same, she said. We know this. Not all families are as tolerant as others. Gailey said she wasn't sure how banning discussion of LGBTQ topics in early elementary school had anything to do with that. And of course, they threw Rotten Tomatoes at her head immediately because that was switching subjects and moving the goalposts. She's saying, Julie Mayfield is saying, this part about outing students to their parents is what concerns me. And Gailey comes back with, I don't see how banning topics of gender and sexual identity from grades kindergarten through 4 has anything to do with that. I know, because it's the other part of the bill we're talking about. Anyway, it struck me, this whole thing, that with these Republican activists screaming about the schools somehow being full of quote-unquote groomers and pedophiles and predators, etc., to whom we want to give guns, by the way, for some strange reason. It seems to me you don't want to hand them the blackmail opportunity of, hey, you who I have identified as LGBTQ in some way, not that you've identified it to me necessarily, that I've figured it out about you, or at least I think I did. I'll tell your parents on you, unless you do something for me. I wouldn't hand that to them. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Yeah, we've gotten through the bulk of this story. There's a couple more, go-rounds, somewhat interesting just to see Republicans being intentionally obtuse about this. And then maybe we'll get some information that might tell us a little bit about the expected outcome of all this stuff. So, once again, Senator Gailey here ducks the real question, saying, I don't understand. Tell me, why would banning discussion of LGBTQ topics in early elementary school have anything to do with that? And it wouldn't. But she goes on to say, we're talking about kids from kindergarten to 4th grade. It's unclear to me how they would feel unsafe by not having LGBTQ topics in their curriculum, she said. Mayfield, however, said that's not what she's concerned about nearly as much as older kids who have started to ask questions they can't raise at home. This bill makes school an unsafe place for a number of children who don't feel comfortable talking to their parents about everything, and also may not now feel comfortable talking to a trusted teacher or coach. The bill would also require parental consent before students are given surveys that ask questions about mental problems, political affiliations, sex behavior or attitudes, or criticisms of family members. Criticism? What? Okay. Well, sure. Why not? Because, doesn't make any sense, so let's do it. Wilmington Republican Senator Michael Lee, another sponsor of the bill, said he thinks this bill will actually help many families. It's incredibly healthy for a parent to know what's going on with a child in school. That's true. Especially in regard to mental health, he said. Yes, but blanket statement that doesn't make any sense in this context. The bill is expected to pass the Senate. It would then go to the state house, where Republican leadership in the chamber would need to decide whether to make changes or to vote on it as is. You know how that process works. Many supporters and opponents from the public also came to Monday's meeting for public comments. The conservative groups Moms for Liberty sent a half dozen representatives who talked about their concerns with issues ranging from sex education to the, quote, medical tyranny of mask mandates during the COVID-19 pandemic. Pause. 1, Moms for Liberty will ring a bell. If it doesn't, it will ring a bell in a few minutes when we let Rosalind McGregor ring that bell. But they're all over the place, of course. And by all over the place, I mean not just geographically widespread. You know, it's sort of a copycat club that you can form in your own area and adopt the name. And in case you don't really know what you're angry or protesting about, they'll send you a fact sheet about what to be angry and protest about as well. A campaign in a box, but for moms, but only moms who are for liberty, of course. And 2, and you'll see this reflected in Rosalind's installment as well, is look how all over the map they are in terms of the issues. And this is increasingly the play, and you should, I bring this up as a separate point and because it comes up again in Rosalind's piece, but you gotta take note of this. This is how it has happened in Virginia. And Virginia is supposed to be the model now for everybody else. They're taking it a little bit further. But because Glenn Youngkin supposedly won office based on this theory, everybody wants a piece of this now. And at the grassroots level, it's basically, all right, well, whatever is angering you now, organize based on that. If you meet with any success whatsoever, either when you're organizing or actually getting elected officials to listen to you, just pivot to the next anger-making outrage thing. Just watch Tucker Carlson and then become angry about that thing. And then you'll be the Moms for Liberty about that thing instead of the thing that you started with. Remember? Right. Here it is in the sentence again. The conservative group Moms for Liberty sent a half dozen representatives who talked about their concerns with issues ranging from sex education to the medical tyranny of mask mandates during the COVID-19 pandemic. Moms for Liberty and other groups like them started as mask protesters, then became vaccine protesters, then became sex education protesters, then became CRT protesters, and I might have had that one backwards, then became, gender identity, and then became diversity training opponents, et cetera, and now finally are signed on with Ron DeSantis and the book banning and the library purging and the fire everybody at the new college or whatever they call the university that they're targeting down there and replace everybody on there and make Christopher Rufo the trustee, even though he doesn't live anywhere near here, et cetera, et cetera. That's the game plan. Just pivot to the next thing. And you'll see exactly the same thing happening in Rosalind's piece, covering Michigan in a few minutes. So I'll just wind this one up here. Parents should have the final say in all important decisions regarding their minor children, said Amy Kappelman, leader of the group's Chatham County division. That would be the Moms for Liberty, I guess. A similar bill, just by way of giving you what to expect in all this, a similar bill also passed the Senate in the last legislative session, but stalled in the House. And that's where the bill is now, in the House. What's going to happen? Well, things have changed. At that time, House Speaker Tim Moore said he didn't move the bill last time because Democratic Governor Roy Cooper would veto it, and Republicans didn't have enough votes to override his veto. But Republicans picked up seats in the 2022 midterms, changing the equation for this session. They now have a veto-proof supermajority in the Senate, and assuming all members are present, House Republicans will need just one Democrat to flip to override Cooper's veto. So maybe you want to contact your legislators if you are a Democrat in North Carolina. Democrats have filed their own version of a parents' rights bill in both chambers this session. Eek. So I don't know. We'll see what's in it. That may not bode well for getting somebody to flip on the veto override, but they might stick to their guns and want only their version. Let's see. The bills share some of the same broad goals of the GOP-backed Senate bill in terms of guaranteeing that parents can have more knowledge and input when it comes to schools, but the Democrats' version doesn't contain any of the language targeting LGBTQ issues that Republicans included in theirs. And that's the difference between the parties. So there you have it. There's not a dime's bit of difference between the two parties except for one's total insistence that everything be about censoring and erasing LGBTQ people, and the other party's insistence that that has nothing to do with anything, and they don't put it in their legislation. That's weird. Anyway, time now to, let's cue up what we have from Roslyn, a brand new installation. Well, brand new, 2 days old, I guess. That's brand new by my standards. And covering yet another locality there in Michigan. Let's roll it out. Maybe I'll leave the microphone open for part of it, or chime in the middle anyway, because I listened to the segment the other day, and once again, there were things that required comment, but I really should just let her do the commentary all by herself. Maybe that's the polite thing to do.
Good morning, David and fellow Kagro in the Morning listeners. Today I'd like to fill you in on what's going on in a school district on the east side of Michigan. The Milan Area School District made the news recently thanks to far-right extremists who made violent threats and read porn during the public comment portion of the school board meeting.
What?
The small town of Milan happens to straddle both Washtenaw and Monroe counties. Milan is in the rural part, 25 miles south of larger progressive Ann Arbor and 38 miles north of Toledo, Ohio. The articles from the Michigan Advance are too long to read in their entirety, so I will summarize to give your listeners the gist of the issues involved. The Milan School District has been a target of Jamie McElvaney, a well-known activist who organized Let Them Play Inc., a group that had rallies at the Capitol in Lansing and sued the state to end COVID-19 restrictions on high school sports. McElvaney's son was the high school quarterback for Milan and graduated this past June. While that lawsuit ultimately failed in the courts, the state ended its ban on contact sports as soon after it was filed. In addition to saying she attended the January 6th mob assault on the Capitol in Washington, McElvaney has also prominently posted debunked election fraud conspiracies and QAnon rhetoric. Let Them Play has now been renamed to Let Them Be. McElvaney and Let Them Be's focus has shifted to sex ed and banning books. McElvaney addressed the Milan School Board on January 12th when she launched into 3 minutes of sexually explicit dialogue she said came from the books at Milan High School. As she spoke, an acquaintance held up various books while McElvaney read aloud passages depicting sexual acts. When her 3 minutes were up, she then held up a piece of paper and shouted, "All the stuff I read here was from Penthouse," before pointing to the books and saying, "And these books are from your school. How is that okay?" But to many observers, it was not at all clear what she had been reading, and they came away with the impression that most, if not all, of what she quoted was from Penthouse. The article also includes actual threatening and curse-laden messages sent to the school board, but I'll leave that for you to explore on your own. In response, a new grassroots group of parents from across the state called MyPass has been created. MyPass advocates for school safety and condemn the incident. MyPass says such behavior is emboldening the worst among us to make death and rape threats to teachers and board members. But it gets worse. McElvaney has joined Let Them Be with the far-right Great Schools Initiative. So have other extremist clubs. In Oakland County, a group called Moms for Liberty has appeared. Moms for Liberty is a right-wing parental rights group with GOP ties to Florida that got involved in local 2022 school board races. GSI is arming parents with a new opt-out form that focuses heavily on cutting out any conversation about gender identity and sexual orientation. GSI registered as a Michigan corporation with a Chicago address tied to the Thomas More Society, which has frequently intervened on right-wing issues, including suing the Walled Lake School District plus Oakland County. At a recent GSI event, organizers said, "If we can create this statewide movement of simultaneous action, we believe we can unify all these different groups. We can bring momentum throughout the month of February across all these groups and really encourage parents that they're not alone." GSI organizers said that if hundreds of parents drop off opt-out forms to their schools, quote, this is going to change everything because it'll be too much for them to handle. And with the ability for us to bring lawsuits, we've got a whole system set up simultaneously across many different places. We think we can make a very strong move with this, unquote. With a list of prohibitions nearly 3 pages long, the opt-out form demands schools ban information related to reproductive health, family planning, and LGBTQ+ and social justice issues. That brings us to the end of my time for today. I wanted to alert your listeners to the issues facing school systems in at least 3 very different counties across the state of Michigan. Such a threat should not stay under the radar, and I appreciate the opportunity to share the warning. This is your Michigan correspondent signing off. Back to you, David.
All right. Thanks, Rosalind. And you see what I mean? It struck me when I was listening to the segment beforehand that, I knew that theme would come up, but there's Moms for Liberty in there. My pass stands for what? Michigan MI, Parents, I don't remember, Parents Alliance for School Safety or Safe Schools or something like that. Just to let you know what those different groups, the full names of those things. But, so again, similar thing. One, I was struck by the fact that Let Them Play just sort of seamlessly changed its name into Let Them Be. Like when we no longer were banning school sports, and then Let Them Play didn't make any sense either as a group to exist at all, or the mission went away. But of course, this parent had enjoyed some measure of political success and didn't want to let go of it. So they just converted it into something else and said, we'll just protest something else that makes me angry and see if we get similar results with that, which is not, there's nothing really wrong with that. I think it's probably a model that everybody follows, right? I mean, if you organize for some political purpose and you have some success with it, one model is you pack up like Cincinnatus and go home, I guess, and you have nothing else to do. You just live a life satisfied with the change that you've made. Or you say, that's not the only thing bothering me, and there's some other things that I think we should change in this country, and you continue on. So it's not weird or strange or invalid, I guess, to do that. I just note that it's interesting that they make the switch. Especially if you organize something like Let Them Play. All right, we will let them play. You will? Oh, okay. Well, I won't take yes for an answer. We now want you to let them be. Let them be what? Don't put masks on their faces. Don't teach them CRT. Don't tell them about sexuality or gender. Well, now hold on a second. What happened to let them be? Why don't, if people are LGBTQ, you're supposed to let them be, right? No, don't let them be. Let us be. We don't want to hear about that. Why don't, so anyway. So between that and the Moms for Liberty and the other groups there who organize around masking, but then decide that CRT makes them mad too, and so they're going to organize around that. And they shouldn't necessarily be able to expect the same results, except that they just organize around the same tactics. Instead of, I guess that's, maybe that's the difference between Republican and Democratic groups. Like, the Democratic groups tend to organize and strategize around policy, and they're there to advocate for policies that make, there's like a legitimate attempt to be logical about it. We think the following policy ought to change for the following reasons, as opposed to, I'm angry about stuff and I want it to go away. And, that last thing that we just succeeded on wasn't the last thing that made me angry. I don't have any real reason why it should go away. I just think it should. I'm sure they think that there's a policy message behind it, though. But anyway, I just thought that was interesting. One, the fact that the same groups are popping up all over the place. And two, that they all sort of follow the same path. And once you give, I guess this is a cautionary tale for elected officials. If you don't particularly agree with them, that they're proof of the old adage about giving people an inch and they'll take a mile. So let them play. All right, we'll let them play. Well, that's not the end of it. We're not going to stop hearing from the quarterback's mom. She's going to still hang around and make trouble for you because she found out she could. She found out your sensitive areas and found your pressure points, and now she's going to bother you for the rest of your life. Anyway, so let's see. Moving on. Oh, I was also struck by the fact that you will see this in print if you take a look at the articles that Rosalind provided for us from the Michigan Advocate, and we'll provide to you in Scott Anderson's summary of what went on today. You'll see that Milan, Michigan, thank God she was here to read those articles for us, because it's spelled like the Italian city of Milan, M-I-L-A-N. And I think we've all had enough experience with this now that we realize that in most cases, if it's named like a European city in particular, they probably pronounce it, quote unquote, wrong in the local version. It's spelled like Milan. It's probably pronounced Milan. Although Paris, Texas is still Paris, Texas, right? But I've run into a couple of these things. And, all right. Well, that's just another one. So we learned something too about local pronunciation. I hope I remember that if I ever run into any more articles about that particular municipality. By the way, speaking of pronunciation, it occurs to me as I'm looking once again at the email that tells me that we got support through PayPal from Mr. Miller earlier. And I guess I was just, I needed to be able to refer to him as Stephen Miller because that was a fun reference. But it is Stephan. It could be Stefan Miller, and I would apologize to the poor Stefan if I am pronouncing it wrong, or if I got it wrong again. I don't know. I've seen it, this spelling pronounced either way. So maybe you want to drop me a line and let me know so I can get it right in case anybody wants to, I don't know what, submit a segment in which they thank you personally. They'll know how to, I don't know. I can't think of any good strategic reason, but people like to have their name pronounced correctly, I think. So, all right, back to Pocket. Let's see what else I have for you here that absolutely must be shared. There are a couple of disjointed other stories, and that's what Fridays are about. Let me see. Does this one, am I going to be able to read this one? Because it's in the Intercept, and I know they very often are paywalled. But no, they'll let me read this one. Fine. Sounds fun. Just sort of one of those things that get lost in the bureaucracy stories, I guess, is a good way to explain this one. I hope that's the explanation. Marines charged in Capitol riot, okay, got highly sensitive spy jobs after January 6th. That sounds like a thing you shouldn't do. James Risen reporting at The Intercept on this one. Following his alleged participation in the insurrection, for instance, Sergeant Joshua Abate, I'm guessing is the pronunciation of A-B-A-T-E, was assigned to an NSA liaison unit at Fort Meade. How do you like that? A Marine charged with taking part in the January 6th insurrection, which is a bad thing all by itself, was transferred into a highly sensitive intelligence assignment at the headquarters of the National Security Agency after the violent attempt to overturn the 2020 election results, Marine Corps officials have acknowledged. The Marine confessed to his role in the Capitol riot last summer during a security clearance interview, but was not charged until last month. Following his alleged participation in the insurrection, Sergeant Joshua Abate, I don't know how he pronounces it, I wonder, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, a special communications signals analyst was assigned to the Marine Cryptologic Support Battalion, which acts as a liaison between the Marines and the NSA at Fort Meade. The transfer into the liaison unit after the Capitol riot placed him inside one of the most sensitive facilities in the entire U.S. government. Maybe a bad idea. 2 other Marines charged with entering the Capitol alongside him on January 6th were also given sensitive new intelligence assignments within the Marine Corps after the insurrection, according to statements from the Corps. Sergeant Dodge Dale Helonen, maybe, was assigned to the 3rd Marine Raider Support Battalion, which goes to Oakland Raiders football games, which is okay because they're in Las Vegas now, I think, right? Anyway, the Marine Raider Support Battalion, which provides intelligence support to the Marine Forces Special Operation Command at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and Corporal Micah Coomer was assigned to the Marines 1st Radio Battalion, which provides signals intelligence and electronic warfare support for the Marine Expeditionary Force based at Camp Pendleton, California. They're all over the place. Like Abate, Helenen and Coomer are highly trained in communications and signals intelligence. The three Marines' assignment to highly sensitive intelligence jobs after they allegedly joined in the January 6th riot has not been previously reported. All three were charged last month in connection with their roles as part of the violent mob that forced members of Congress to flee for their lives and delay certification of the 2020 election results. Abate, Helenen, and Coomer are accused of offenses including trespassing, disorderly conduct, and illegal parading or picketing in a restricted building. The Marine Corps initially released little information about the three men. The service provided only brief descriptions of their current assignments and did not publicly acknowledge that all were given new assignments after January 6th. We are aware of an investigation and the allegations, the Corps wrote in its initial terse statement after the charges against the three Marines were made public. The Marine Corps is fully cooperating with the appropriate authorities in support of the investigation. But after The Intercept independently discovered that all three Marines had been given new intelligence assignments following the insurrection, the Corps confirmed that they were all transferred to new roles after January 6th and provided information about their assignments at the time of the insurrection. Abate and Helenen also received promotions in rank following the Capitol riot, according to the Corps. The reassignments raise serious new questions about the ability of both the military and the U.S. intelligence community to identify right-wing extremists in their midst. Since the Capitol riot, the Pentagon has claimed that it has been trying to root out extremists, but there have been few signs that the problem has yet been reduced or even that the scale of the threat has been adequately measured. What's more, the Pentagon's efforts are now being impeded by congressional Republicans who are seeking to block initiatives to oust right-wing radicals from the military. An early warning of Republican opposition came last summer when the Senate Armed Services Committee voted in favor of legislative language designed to halt Pentagon attempts to counter extremist influence in the military's ranks. Every Republican senator on the panel voted to block the anti-extremist training, and they succeeded when Maine Independent Senator Angus King joined them. You dope. Okay. Now that Republicans control the House, they are vowing to go after what they call woke policies at the Pentagon. Efforts to root out right-wing extremists are certain to be among their prime targets, right? So they go with the woke thing. That means I'm getting rid of people who believe in CRT. Yeah, but it also means that you're not getting rid of people who participated in the insurrection. Because that's woke to do that. All right. While Pentagon officials have talked extensively about the problem of right-wing extremism in the military, the U.S. intelligence community has so far been much more secretive about the issue. That's who they are, I guess. Intelligence officials have reported on the rising threat posed by white nationalism and right-wing domestic terrorism, but there is no public data on the extent of the problem within its ranks, and little evidence that they are taking significant action to prevent the spread of extremism inside their own agencies. Intelligence officials declined to discuss whether any investigation is being conducted to determine how Abate, Helenen, and Coomer could be given such sensitive intelligence positions after allegedly participating in the January 6th mob. An NSA spokesperson declined to comment on Abate's role at the Marines NSA liaison office and refused to say whether the NSA is conducting a counterintelligence investigation to examine whether Abate compromised any operations. A spokesperson for the Office of the Director of National Intelligence also declined to comment. I'll pause here just for a second to remind you of the readings that we've done over the past week or so from OCCRP and Carolyn Orbueno, etc., talking about the extent to which very often Russians are behind the active measures that drive people to do things like this. It would be, I think, extraordinarily important to think about whether or not Marines assigned to sensitive intelligence missions have in the past fallen prey themselves to manipulation by Russian active measures. That might be something you want to know about and do what you can to exclude from highly sensitive intelligence mission personnel, I guess. To me, that makes some sense. The three Marines are not the first with intelligence community links to be charged in connection with the January 6th insurrection. Last September, Hatchet Speed. I can't believe that's a real name. I remember that one. A Navy reservist who had previously worked with the Naval War, Space Field Activity, like an activity for kids 6 to 8, right? NAVWAR Space Field Activity at the National Reconnaissance Office, which operates the nation's spy satellites, not the Italian ones, the American ones, was charged after telling an undercover FBI agent that he had gone to the U.S. Capitol with members of the Proud Boys, an extremist group that was at the center of the insurrection. Yeah, okay. It seems clear from interviews and court documents that investigators were slow to identify Abate, Hellinan, and Coomer. At the time of the insurrection, the three men were friends and were all assigned to the Marine Corps Information Operations Center at Quantico, Virginia, about 30 miles south of Washington. The center is involved in psychological warfare training, and development for the Marines, among other functions. On January 6th, the three went to the Capitol together, entering the building at about 2:20 p.m. through the Senate wing door, according to video footage and photographs taken during the attack. More after this. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time, just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue with this Intercept report about the three Marines in, particularly sensitive intelligence roles, all of whom were among the mob on January 6th participating in the insurrection. Let's see, where did we leave off? Oh, yes, right. So we found some video footage and photographs taken during the attack that proved that these three were, in fact, inside the U.S. Capitol building. They were in there for about an hour in the midst of the insurrection, according to the criminal complaint filed by the government in their case. Hellinan carrying a yellow "Don't Tread on Me" flag. Okay. Loves the nostalgia, does he? The three began roaming the halls with the mob that had flooded into the Capitol. At 2:32 p.m., they entered the Capitol Rotunda, placed a red MAGA hat on a statue, and took photos with it, according to the complaint. They continued to walk through the building using their cell phones to take video and photos because they're so clued into secure intelligence operations, using their phones and whatnot for all of this. The three got away without being immediately identified. Abate later said that, quote, he heard how the event was being portrayed negatively. Wow. And decided that he should not tell anybody about going into the U.S. Capitol building, according to the complaint. Coomer was apparently the first to be identified by the FBI. On August 13th, 2021, federal search warrant was served on Facebook, authorizing the search of the Instagram account MrCoomer08. Coomer had posted photos from inside the Capitol on January 6th to his personal account with the caption, "Glad to be apart," as one word, of history. Maybe that makes a certain amount of sense if you think about it. Anyway, standing athwart history anyway. In a separate Instagram conversation on January 31st, 2021, Coomer said that, quote, everything in this country is corrupt. We honestly need a fresh restart. I'm waiting for the boogaloo. Oh, wow. You're not going to really want that guy in the military at all, much less in a sensitive intelligence area. What's a boogaloo? The user he was talking to asked, according to the government's complaint. Civil War II, Coomer replied. Fantastic. Well, they're not really up on their signals intelligence. Is he the one that's actually working in signals intelligence now that I think about it? Which one of them was that? Let me just scroll back. The one who's in, I guess, the radio battalion, which they now call, yeah, that is Coomer. Wow. Corporal Micah Coomer, assigned to the Marines' 1st Radio Battalion, which provides signals intelligence and electronic warfare support from out of Camp Pendleton. So Mr. Signals Intelligence is confessing to federal crimes on social media. And glad to be a part of it and talking about how he can't wait for the boogaloo. In addition to acknowledging his involvement in the insurrection through his social media posts, Coomer was also identified by a witness in the Marines who picked him out of footage taken inside the Capitol, the complaint says. It took investigators nearly another year to confront Abate about his presence in the Capitol that day. In June 2022, Abate was interviewed as part of his security clearance process and admitted going into the U.S. Capitol during the insurrection with, quote, 2 buddies. Abate said that as they walked through the rotunda, one of his friends smoked a cigarette and they, quote, tried not to get hit with tear gas, according to the complaint. Because I can't believe this is being portrayed as a negative event, even though we're getting tear gassed. Abate also admitted that he had decided to keep his involvement secret. When contacted by phone, relatives of Coomer and Hellinan declined to comment on the case. David Dishley, an attorney for Abate, said the next hearing in the case was scheduled for March 21st in federal court in Washington. So, yeah, that's great. All of our signals intelligence people are complete morons, as well as insurrectionists and traitors. This is fantastic news. All right. Let's see. Other things to share with you. I don't know. It's been a while since we had any George Santos news, so I thought perhaps I would share with you the entry from Monday of this week. Walter Einenkel posting this over at Daily Kos and based on reports from elsewhere in the news. I just wanted to catch up on this myself. I'm not certain what's going on here. Revelations about George Santos's, quote, animal rescue, the charity he said he ran, are worse and weirder than expected. So, who could have predicted that anything would be worse and weirder about George Santos? I just want to see what this is about. There are, of course, multiple investigations ongoing into a variety of suspected frauds perpetrated by Santos, the newest Republican representative out of Nassau County, New York. The investigations cover a wide geographical range from, well, I guess really it is geographical because some of it's in Brazil. Right, okay. From whether Santos perpetrated fraud in his own congressional district, in campaign finance against donors from all over the place, and whether he perpetrated fraud in Brazil. The campaign finance investigations are so mystifying. So, how mystifying are they? So mystifying. They have investigations inside of investigations ongoing. There's a link, but I don't even know what the hell's going on with this. This is to another entry at Daily Kos from Laura Clausen. What was a seasoned Republican operative doing going into business with George Santos? The headline asks. Okay, well, maybe we'll check that out later on, depending on how long this one takes us. On top of this, to continue with Walter's entry here, comes the never-ending reports about the various huge lies Santos has told about himself, his identity, and his family's history. It includes lying about being of Jewish ancestry, lying about having family killed during the Holocaust. It includes his mother lying about her being killed in one of the Twin Towers on 9/11. One of the more distasteful alleged frauds, Santos, who went by the name Anthony DeVolder before switching to George Santos, generated was to lie and steal a few $1,000s raised through a GoFundMe for a homeless veteran's dying dog back in 2016. Asterisk here notes, yes, this is also being investigated. Santos has denied pretty much everything, but the evidence is pretty robust and comprehensive. Now, the New York Times has a new report all about Santos's non-profit work, running a company called Friends of Pets United. Guess, says Walter. Well, Santos /DeVolder, claims to have founded the nonprofit back in 2013, working to accomplish all kinds of animal rescue efforts, but according to the people who came across FOPU over those years, Anthony DeVolder's charity work was, well, wicked sketchy. Huh, okay. You think we were from Massachusetts with that. An example they give comes from a store owner who was kind enough to host a pet adoption event set up by DeVolder's Friends of Pets United. The charity's leader asked the owner of Pet Oasis in Staten Island if he could make out a check for all the proceeds generated by the event to Anthony DeVolder, not Friends of Pets United. That is pretty sketchy. The owner said no way and made the check out to the supposed nonprofit, as one would do. A few days later, when checking his bank records, the owner saw that the check had been deposited into Anthony DeVolder's account. How? The check had been, quote, altered, and Friends of Pets United was scratched out. None of this is surprising at this point, as George Santos has shown himself to be something of a pathological liar, and some might say sociopathic presence in politics. But by the way, just interesting for, note for the banks there, that can you make it out to Anthony DeVolder? No, I'm not going to do that. All right, well, I'll just scratch it out and write Anthony DeVolder on it. That's not going to work. It's a check. You know what? It works. How do you like that? Just like YouTube doesn't actually check the things that it pulls from my account. Right. The banks don't actually look at anything. They just deposit it. You want it put in this number account? Fine. Whatever. The Washington Post reports Santos's campaign biography changed a tad over the past couple of years. In 2020, his work with Friends of Pets United was described this way, I guess, quote, also passionate about animals and animal welfare, George founded and ran a nonprofit 501c3 called Friends of Pets United from 2013 to 2018, an animal rescue operation which was able to effectively rescue 2,400 dogs and 280 cats and successfully conducted the TNR, trap, neuter, and release, of over 3,000 cats. Impressive. What does that look like as of November of 2022? It says he has worked tirelessly with animal rescue efforts in the tri-state area. Yup, that's it. I guess that's all it says now. The change makes sense as the Times reports that there's been no proof of this charity ever really existing outside of GoFundMe pages and a Facebook group that's no longer active. In fact, the Times says that many of the Facebook posts Santos put up showed other adoption agencies' work and efforts, which he would repost as proof of his efforts in the rescue community. Real stolen valor scumbaggery. As for the idea that FOPU was a charity, and a very real tax-exempt one at that, no one has been able to find any registry records for anything named Friends of Pets United. New York's Department of Agriculture and Markets said that it had no records that the organization was registered as a rescue, as would have been required starting in September of 2017. The end of a con is also very well illustrated in the final year of operation, quote-unquote operation, for FOPU. As according to multiple people interviewed by the Times, Santos repeatedly used the line that he was closing down his shelter repeatedly throughout the year. He used it with legitimate rescue agencies over most of 2018 to house an animal here or there. A veterinary technician named Andrea Dos Santos had connected with George Santos, Un Santos, right there, interestingly enough, back when he was allegedly doing homeless Navy veteran Rich Osthoff's dying dog scam, to scam money rather, using the dog to scam money. She didn't know anything about the scamming part, and in 2017 found herself offering up her farm in New Jersey, because Santos said his Friends of Pets United would use it. In order to make that happen, the barn would need to be fixed up, and Ms. Dos Santos agreed to host a big charity event there. She solicited donations from friends and laid out her own money for refreshments. George even reportedly set up a GoFundMe that purposefully raised over $2,100 on top of what he had seemed to have raised, mostly by Ms. Dos Santos's work. Eesh. Sadly, George Santos controlled the money, and Ms. Dos Santos said she never received any of it to help work on the farmhouse. She says she called and got a lot of runaround, saying that in a final conversation she told George, "Karma's going to get you, and if it does, you're going to remember me because you are going to deserve everything you're going to get." Since that time, Santos's only defense is to say he was just a cog in the wheel of this seemingly fake pet rescue group. He has vaguely blamed others. Just who they are, he won't say, though who those people are remain a mystery, if they exist at all, which seems unlikely. So he's robbing people left and right using pets to do it, and that is fairly rotten, but it's, par for the course with him. Just thought I'd update you on that news. All right, let's see. A couple of the things that we can perhaps squeeze in before the day ends. I'm just going to kind of scroll and see whether there's anything else I want to skip down to. Probably, but all right. Let me see if I can clear out what is up top. Oh, well, one, I'll just maybe briefly look into because it looks like an awfully long article, but I want to note the fact that the article exists and it might be something you want to catch up on over the weekend. Outrageous story. I'm sure all the details are worth the time. From Open Vallejo, we're talking about Vallejo. Where are we? California? I don't even know. Now that I think about it, I'm thinking of Mission Vallejo, but that's Mission Viejo, not Vallejo. But where are we talking about? I have the thing from Open Vallejo, which is, will they tell us? Yes, California. Okay. Open Vallejo is an award-winning, independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit newsroom serving the public interest, right? As the first project of the Informed California Foundation. Open Vallejo is also a permanent design laboratory for open source, high-impact, broadly accessible frameworks for ensuring local transparency, accountability, and information justice. Okay. So at least now we know the setting. So Vallejo, California. Our setting, on the headline, senior officials ordered destruction of Vallejo police shooting evidence. Wow. Lawrence DeSalt and Jeffrey King of the byline on this piece. The Vallejo City Attorney's Office has long resisted public scrutiny of the police department's frequent shootings, with a new law poised to force the release of shooting records, right? This is how people organize on these things. Lots of excessive force being used, police shootings, etc. People protest. They kneel at football games. No, you can't do that. They march in the streets. No, you can't do that. They march on the sidewalks. No, you can't do that. You're burning cities to the ground. How dare you? All right, well, we'll just agitate for political change. What about if we pressure our lawmakers to pass a law that says that you have to release the records of these shootings so that we can go over them and deal with them in the legal context and wrangle over them in courtrooms like civilized folk really should? Well, all right, that got passed. So now, as it says here, a new law poised to force the release of shooting records. And so what happens? A lawyer and a detective made the decision. No court can reverse. They just said, F it, we'll destroy all the evidence. And I guess there's just nothing in the law yet. I mean, now they can be charged with the destruction of the evidence, I guess, if they go ahead and do anything. But as is frequently the case, we find out, well, we'll just not do anything about it. It's all so unclear. We don't know what to do. Anyway, I'll give you a taste of the article and give you a link to it later on. It might be something you want to read over the weekend. Just days into her transfer to the evidence unit 2 years ago, Vallejo police assistant Tina Encarnacion made her way to a tall metal cabinet known as the homicide bookshelf and pulled case 12-11085. I don't know how they read their numbers out there, but 12-11085. Encarnacion found herself holding the case file of the notorious killing of Mario Romero, a young father whose death at the hands of Vallejo police in 2012 sparked citywide protests. Encarnacion documented her next steps in a public servant's efficient prose. Quote, "Per city attorney, this case has been approved for disposal," she wrote in the file's evidence log at 2:31 p.m. "Final disposition, destroyed." Over the next several days, Encarnacion would empty box after box of evidence of police shootings into a large city dumpster. In January 2021, officials for the city of Vallejo intentionally and with approval from a senior attorney for the city destroyed key evidence in multiple police killings and one non-fatal shooting. Documents obtained in a public records lawsuit filed by Open Vallejo show. The city destroyed the records, although many were set to be disclosed under California transparency laws, a potential crime, according to a motion filed by the newsroom this month. To uncover how the evidence came to be destroyed by a department already under investigation by the state attorney general over the number and nature of its police shootings, Open Vallejo amended its public records lawsuit, deposed multiple city employees, and promoted the release of hundreds of pages of logs, reports, and internal communications. Together, the files reveal the city's troubling pattern of anti-transparent practices in the wake of a new law that opened police shooting records to public scrutiny. The files also show that the January 2021 purge violated city policy and potentially Vallejo's agreement with the California Department of Justice. So that's some setup for some incredible story. I hope that you'll give it some time and read it over the weekend. It's fairly extensive, and I don't think we'd be able to make it all the way through. And I think you can pretty much see where this story is going. It always amazes me that I always thought that, one way of simplifying the criminal code a little bit and giving it some teeth is I've always felt that if you are facing trial for some crime, the underlying crime, perhaps let's say the shootings themselves, or whatever the situation may be, if you destroy the evidence that would otherwise lead to your conviction, it seems to me that there should be a flexible sliding scale of punishment for the destruction of evidence and the obstruction of justice charges that you face. Instead of facing up to 3 years in jail or whatever the standard is for obstruction of justice, it should be sliding scale, meaning that there should be if you're convicted of the obstruction, you should just be sentenced for the crime for which you were originally being charged, and that there ought to be at trial the right to instruct the jury to assume guilt on any counts on which the evidence was destroyed. In other words, that there should be no benefit whatsoever to the destruction of evidence. If you're being charged, and I don't know, maybe I'm not a criminal lawyer, so maybe this actually happens, but if it does, great. If it doesn't, it should. If you're being charged with a crime that carries a 10-year prison sentence, but you destroy the evidence, and then in the end, they're like, well, we can't prove the case against you with the underlying crime, but we can get you for the destruction of evidence, and that carries a 3-year penalty. Well, you've just saved yourself 7 years in prison. Why wouldn't you destroy the evidence? Whereas if they say at trial, well, the evidence is missing, but it's missing as a result of this person's malfeasance. Yes, they should be sentenced to 3 years in prison for destroying the evidence, but it should come on top of the 10-year sentence for which you're permitted to assume their guilt because they were found guilty of destroying the evidence of their guilt. So it should be a 13-year stint, not a 3-year stint. I don't know how it really works, though. But I'm just not a criminal. I'm practicing criminal attorney, criminal defense, or prosecutor. I couldn't tell you. But anyway, to me, that's the way they should handle these things. And it's shocking that they don't, except, I guess at some point nothing's shocking anymore. Anyway, I wanted you to hear about that one, and might be something you want to read about over the weekend. I'll skim down a little bit deeper into Pocket, and perhaps read you something. Might be able to squeeze this one in before the whole thing ends. Shall we... which one to do? Not even sure which direction to go. Maybe we'll talk about the Trump legal stuff again next week. We'll pick up with that. But maybe we'll leave with this now aging piece from Amanda Marcotte, who wrote in Salon. What's the date on this piece here? January 31st. I just kind of thought this should be in the mix. And perhaps relevant again, given that at Tuesday's State of the Union, Paul Pelosi was present as a guest, no doubt, of the speaker, but he was featured prominently on screen at one point. But this is an interesting article. Pelosi's attacker, apparently, is actually proud of himself for what he did. The GOP emboldened him. Of course, the Pelosi suspect feels supported. The GOP is the party of political violence now, and the correct conclusion drawn by Amanda in this piece. David DePape, if that's his name's pronunciation, seems proud of himself. On Friday, this was back at the end of January, of course, a judge ordered the release of video footage that appears to show him beating Paul Pelosi, the husband of the then Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, of course you know the story, with a hammer and refusing to listen to police orders to drop the weapon. Interesting how that came out. Anyway, the video is hard to watch, of course, showing the suspect tackling Pelosi to the ground and viciously pounding him with a hammer while the police attempt to pull him off the 82-year-old man. Bizarrely, however, in a phone call to a San Francisco reporter made the same day, DePape's only regret was that the violence wasn't worse. Now that you have all seen the body cam footage, I have an important message for everyone in America, DePape told KTVU's Amber Lee. You're welcome. Then he apologized that he didn't get more of them. Like many of the January 6th insurrectionists who have been arrested, DePape appears to have no interest in backing down from the Donald Trump-fueled conspiracy theories that led to his violence. Instead, the chilling audio hints at a man who feels confident in his false accusations and supported in his belief that the Trumpist agenda must be forced upon America through violence. DePape appears delusional in many regards, but he is sadly right about one thing. His pro-violence views have a lot of support from Republicans, both politicians and voters. While he took it to the next level, DePape was only acting on a correct interpretation of Trump's implicit message. Since Democrats can't be beaten at the ballot box, power must be seized through violence. It's a view that, while they often avoid saying out loud, is widely backed by the rest of the GOP. The party, after all, has gone out of its way to reaffirm support for Trump in the wake of the deadly riot he unleashed on the Capitol 2 years ago. DePape, although it's misspelled here as DuPage, is getting support from Republicans in both fairly direct ways and in ways that are larger and more diffuse. The more direct approval comes in the form of, quote, jokes and conspiracy theories about the attack on Pelosi. Former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger tweeted a reminder of how many powerful Republicans engaged in this in the immediate aftermath of the attack. He mistakenly attributes the Seattle Times, but it was in fact the New York Times that compiled this list. And here is his tweet about it. Thanks to... Well, I guess we'll thank the New York Times for this list of people who've made fun of Paul Pelosi. Hold them accountable. The whole list is here, including Ted Cruz, Murdery Trader Green, Clay Higgins, Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson of North Carolina, and Mary Williams Benefield, Republican State House candidate in Georgia. Other prominent figures also displayed here: Glenn Beck, Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Elon Musk, maybe more with whom you're familiar. Oh, and there's Representative Claudia Tenney of New York as well. Anyway, a lot of people on Twitter, just desperate to muddy the waters around this, quibbled with the phrase made fun, arguing that many of these people merely asked questions about the attack. This, of course, is nonsense. The questions were actually conspiracy theories, most of which were grossly homophobic, suggesting that the attack was something other than right-wing political violence. Nor is there a thick line between making fun and conspiracy theories, and not just because the latter is often accompanied by tasteless jokes. Both conspiracy theories and jokes are about minimizing violence for the purpose of sending the same implicit message of winking support, the message that DePape clearly picked up on. Even after disturbing footage of the attack was released, right-wing media figures continued to push asinine conspiracy theories, implying that Pelosi somehow faked this or was complicit in his own attempted murder. It's unlikely that many, if any, people actually believe this nonsense. The purpose of such conspiracy theories is to continue justifying a refusal to condemn this attack, i.e., just another way to signal support for DePape's alleged crime. As gross as all of this is, and it really is time for us to play our way out here, it is sadly not surprising. This isn't just about a couple dozen prominent Republicans finding ways to downplay Pelosi's suffering either. In the 2 years since the January 6th insurrection, Republicans have made it clear that they have fully embraced political violence. Sure, they'll whine and fuss if anyone dares say so out loud, because gaslighting the public is part of the abusive stance they've taken toward our democracy. But they're still the party of Trump, and after January 6th, that means being the party of domestic terrorism. That Trump is still the leader of the GOP should not be in doubt, no matter how much wish casting is done on MSNBC about his low-energy campaign events. Under Speaker McCarthy, the Republicans who control the House are gearing up to run a massive revenge campaign on anyone who took a stand against Trump's efforts to overthrow democracy. McCarthy has already removed 2 California Democrats, Schiff and Swalwell, from the Intelligence Committee for the obvious purpose of punishing them for speaking out against Trump. All this sends a strong, unmistakable signal. McCarthy and House Republicans aren't just fine with what happened on January 6th, but they will do everything in their power to shield him from consequences. All right. Despite wishful talk about some GOP elite, about someone beating Trump in the 2020-24 primary, most signs are suggesting the party is still in Trump's thrall. There's more to it. You can read it, of course, but you'll have to do so after the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, which comes up next.
NetRootsRadio.com.
Right here also on NetRootsRadio.com.
You've been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
What's on tap? Well, despite repeated requests, Florida has still not explained to the College Board how the African American Studies in Advanced Placement course violates state law. You know what I'm talking about. And the Ohio Department of Education says it won't do anything about neo-Nazi homeschoolers. Yikes.